We'll have more live coverage from Nashua, New Hampshire in a little over an hour from now. Right now, though, Jeb Bush speaking at the town hall earlier today.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all very much. Thank you very much. Hey, Dad. Hey, W, how you doing? Thank you all very much. I appreciate your hard work on behalf of the conservative cause. FITN. Something that you all take very seriously. And now on my journey for the last 9 months, I do too. I love campaigning here. I love interacting with people that actually are concerned about the future of the country. They're not latched on to the big personalities on the stage. They're interested in someone's view about how we're going to preserve and protect Social Security, how we're going to create an environment where people's lives can get better, how we can keep America safer and stronger and freer. I've learned a lot being a candidate here, and I look forward to the next 2 weeks to be able to continue to make my case that we need a proven leader to be President of the United States. A month and a half ago, I got to go to the Citadel. That's located in one of my other favorite states, South Carolina. And at the Citadel, I was asked to give a speech about the role of America in the world. And before we did that, I went at 6 a.m. with the Summerall Guards, this elite group of young men who, all of whom, or the great majority of whom, are going to go serve in the military, the Marines, the Navy, the Army. And we did PT. Did about 25 push-ups, which I barely got done. Sit-ups, calisthenics. I thought we were over, and then they said, let's go run. And we marched, we ran in tandem 3 miles. And then when they circled around and they started asking me questions. They asked, will you have my back when I'm in the military? Will you support the troops? What is the role of America in the world? Are we going to get back in the game? And the answers to all those questions, quite similar, was yes. I will be a commander-in-chief that will back up the troops. I'm proud of the fact that I have 11 Medal of Honor recipients supporting me. I'm proud that 30 generals and admirals are supporting my campaign because they sense that we're on the need to be able to have a commander-in-chief that restores the role of America in the world. And so I gave this speech, and I laid out what we needed to do. We need to rebuild our military. The Army needs to get back to 490,000 troops rather than the 420 that we're moving towards. A devastating number that will not allow us to have the ability to project force in the world. Not to be the world's policeman. This president constantly talks about how if you're not in favor of his nuanced, sophisticated view of leading from behind, and we're all part of the community of nations as though we're just another vote in the United Nations, that if you don't adhere to that, that you're a warmonger, an occupier. That is totally false. The presidents behind me understood that. They advocated peace through strength. The way to create a more peaceful and secure world is to rebuild our military, to make sure we don't have to use it. We need to make sure that the force levels are high. Right now, half of the Marines stationed in the United States don't reach the level of readiness. Imagine that. The Navy now is half the size it was at the time of Operation Desert Storm, and 2 weeks ago, the Secretary of Defense called for greater cutbacks. The Air Force is older than the pilots. The planes are older than the pilots that fly it. And we're creating situations where more and more deployments take place where families are stretched. We have to rebuild the military. If you asked our government, our federal government, to do one thing, it is to keep us safe. And you cannot do that by talking your way to security. You can't talk about red lines and not follow up. You can't talk about leading from behind, a notion that should be eliminated from the language of any president of the United States. You can't talk tough calling ISIS the JV team and do nothing about it. You can't call Russia a regional power and then 30 days later allow them to invade Ukraine. You have to back it up with the strongest, mightiest military force known to man. That is how you create security. And I pledge to those cadets that is exactly what I will do. In August of this year, I had a chance to go to the Reagan Library to lay out a detailed plan to destroy ISIS. That's before the attacks on Paris. And that's before the tragedy of San Bernardino. Because, my friends, it was a problem then too. It's easy to react to events. Everybody does that. All of a sudden, You see these strongmen emerge when there's a problem that is front and center, and all of a sudden national security becomes a real issue for people because they're scared. But prior to that, ISIS was a threat. They're a threat when they form a caliphate the size of Indiana. 35 to 40,000 battle-tested radical Islamic terrorists, controlling territory and hundreds of millions of dollars of resources. And so in the Reagan Library, I laid out a strategy to deal with this threat. It means we need to arm the Kurds with more sophisticated weapons directly because they're our strongest fighting force and strongest allies in Iraq. It means we need to reestablish a relationship with the Sunni tribal leaders that have been pushed away when we abandoned Iraq. The void was filled by militias, Shia militia, and by ISIS. And the Sunnis that were our partners to create a fragile but secure Iraq need to get back in the game and know that the United States will be there to help them. It means we have to embed our troops, that are already there, by the way, 3,500 troops, inside the Iraqi military to give them the training and backbone they need to ultimately create security. It means we need to get lawyers off the backs of the warfighters so that they can do their job. This is not a law enforcement exercise. It means we need safe zones in Syria to deal with the refugee problem. The way you solve this problem is to deal with the cause of the reason why there are 4 million people uprooted from their homes. We need safe zones. Today there are people starving to death because of the brutality of the Assad regime. And if you're a Christian or a moderate Muslim inside of ISIS-controlled territories, you're either going to be beheaded, raped, or enslaved. There needs to be safe zones for these folks, but we also need a safe zone to have a Sunni-led force with the Arab world's financing and support, a unified force, well-trained to take out ISIS and bring about stability in Syria. And the no-fly zone that people are worried about, we need one. We need to make sure that our air superiority allows us to do exactly what we need to do, to stop the barrel bombing and stop the killing and make sure that ISIS terrorists are looking up in the air from time to time, wondering when they will be hit. No more leaflets being sent to the truck drivers. No more leaflets being sent to truck drivers saying, hey, by the way, I know you may not know this, but you may not know that you're an enemy combatant. Please change your views. Don't be a truck driver to take illicit sales of diesel fuel and gasoline across Turkey or to sell it to the Assad regime. They know who they are. They're participating in this war. ISIS has declared war on us. We need to declare war on them. And as President of the United States, I will do just that. This is the 3rd anniversary of Hillary Clinton's testimony where she said, it doesn't make a difference on Benghazi. 3rd anniversary. Well, we now know it made a big difference for Hillary Clinton. It made a big difference for her. When she had to testify under oath, she said that the reason why we have this threat, why Benghazi occurred, was because of terrorism. Even though she told the families something completely different, that she was going to go after the director of the video, that they, through the fog of war, continued to say that that was the reason why Benghazi took place. She lied to the families and told the truth to her daughter and to the president of Egypt. Shameful. Shameful. We do not need Hillary Clinton as commander-in-chief and president of the United States. I spend most of my time in New Hampshire, so I get to see everybody's TV ads. There are a lot of them. I don't know how you guys, God bless you. I guess we don't have any car ads anymore here, so maybe there's some benefit. If you don't like car ads, you're not going to see any for a while. But in those ads, Hillary Clinton touts her Secretary of State experience, that her experience makes her qualified to be president. Well, let's talk about that. Benghazi, Iran, calling Assad a reformer. He's killed 250,000 innocent people. The Russian reset, that hadn't worked out very well. All of this is a sign of a Secretary of State and a foreign policy that is reactive, rather than believing that the United States leadership in the world truly matters. So here's the deal. Should I become President of the United States, the first thing I would do as President would be announce that we're moving our embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem to show that we're back in the game in the Middle East. And I will make sure that our friends know that we have their back, that we won't be talking as much as we had over the last 8 years. No, not as much talking, but they'll know that we have their back. And our enemies will fear us, not to create a condition for war, but to create a more stable peace. I don't believe that Hillary Clinton understands that, and I do. And I think it's important to have someone that has a steady hand to be President of the United States in these dangerous times. If we're going to create a more stable world, then what are we going to do at home? And here's what I believe to be true. The Washington culture needs to change. I believe passionately, because I had firsthand experience as governor of a state that needed to have a little bit of change as well, a little bit of disruption, a little bit of turning upside down and shaking a little bit. That's what I did as governor of the state of Florida. We need term limits, just as we have in Florida. It works, I promise you. We need it in Washington, D.C. We need a line item veto power for the next President of the United States. I know how that works because I used the line item veto power to the extent that they called me Vito Corleone. 2,500 separate line items in the budget, totaling $2.5 billion. Not to be the big dog on the stage to show that I was all powerful, but simply to say, look, government shouldn't grow faster than our ability to pay for it. That's what we should be doing, is limiting government's power. Elected officials, when they finish their time, they ought to go back home. We should have a 6-year lobbying ban so that they don't immediately go out the back door and begin to lobby their former colleagues. This is a system that no one believes works anymore. They can't balance budgets. They can't even pass a budget. Even when they agree, they find ways not to agree. They argue about arcane amendments to bills that never get passed. It is so removed from everyday life. Disposable income in this country is down $2,300 than the day that Barack Obama was nominated or inaugurated as president. There are 6.5 million more people living in poverty. And they're talking about stuff that is completely irrelevant to the lives of people outside of Washington, D.C. Changing the culture is the first step to getting government back on the side of people that want to rise up. And I know how to do that because I did it as governor of the state of Florida. As governor, we took on the queer civil service system, this idea of lifetime employment, that you can just basically ride it out. 40% pay for federal workers is 40% higher pay and benefits than it is in the private sector for a like-kind job. And you get a lifetime employment guarantee? No, that's not how it works. In Florida, we took on very powerful interests and changed our career civil service system. So while Floridians were creating 1.3 million jobs in my 8 years, leading the nation 7 out of 8 years, the government declined by 11% in terms of the number of jobs because you could fire someone for incompetence. And guess what? Government workers, most of whom are good people, did better jobs because they knew they had to, and they knew they wanted to. And the people around them that didn't care got fired. It lifted the morale of the departments and agencies that did important work. We need that in Washington, D.C. And you know where it should start? The Veterans Administration, the Department of Veterans Affairs. I have traveled all across this country talking to veterans organizations, to veterans, to people that have served, and it is disgraceful. It is disgraceful what we do with veterans. They serve, they sacrifice, their family sacrifices. They have unique challenges when they come home. And we treat them as though they don't care. They're not important. They are important. It is a definition of who we are as a nation, how we treat our veterans. And here's the deal. As President of the United States, I won't take any excuses for the scandals and the corruption and the ineptitude that exists inside the Department of Veterans Affairs. We'll start canning people, and I promise you it will get better because it has to get better. No more waiting lists for veterans. Lowering the waiting list, having bonuses of $140 million going out to people in management without giving veterans cares, where veterans died and only 3 people were fired. Heads will roll outside that department, I promise you that, because we need to do a better job. We will make sure veterans have a card that says they can go to a private provider. I know that's such an un-American idea to give consumers choices. At a town hall meeting 2 days ago, a daughter of a veteran, an elderly man, had to drive an hour and a half to go down to Boston to a veteran clinic when her dad was having an illness at 2 o'clock in the morning. There are hospitals galore in her community that could have easily taken him. It was not a veteran-related disease. It was simply the gentleman was aging. Why shouldn't he have a card that says, I'm going to go to my regional hospital or I'm going to go to my local doctor? That is the fair and right thing to do. If we change the culture in Washington, then we can get about the business of changing the economy of this country to make sure that we have high sustained economic growth. I've laid out a detailed agenda on how to do that. In fact, for all the wonks in the crowd, any wonks here other than me? Thank you. Only one wonk. A wonkette. Go to jeb2016.com and you'll see the full agenda to create a 4% growth strategy. I know how to do this because in Florida our growth was 4.4% in 8 years. We can do this. Don't let anybody tell you that we should lessen the aspirations of this extraordinary country. Don't let anybody tell you that the new normal is 2% growth. You just have to get used to it. Here's the deal. 2% growth means more people interdependent, intergenerational poverty, more people stuck. 2% growth means declining income for the middle class. 2% growth means that young people will be correct in their views today, millennials that believe that the American dream is dead. 4% growth, on the other hand, will lift people out of poverty. We'll begin to allow people to have a pay raise for the first time in a decade. We'll make sure that this country continues to be hopeful and optimistic, where people will embrace the unforeseen because they won't be fearful of it. They'll opt to economic opportunity over economic security. And that means we need a radical departure on what we have today. On day one, I will repeal all of the Obamacare rules that are work in progress. I will respect the Constitution. I believe in the second Article 2 of the Constitution. I think we need a strong presidency. But this president has trampled over the Constitution, creating doubts and fears and divides that should not exist. That's what we need to do. Growing our economy will lift our spirits, but we also need to recognize that we have to win. We can talk about the conservative cause. Man, I've been doing it a long time. I'm 600 years old in political years. Some of you may know that. They're like dog years. I can remember in 1964 campaigning as a 10-year-old for that guy right there when he was running for the United States Senate. It was George, Jeb, Neil, Marvin, I don't know if Dara was even born yet, on an elephant in Midland, Texas. I've believed in the conservative cause my entire adult life. I have fought for the principles of limited government, of personal responsibility, of individual freedom, that the pursuit of dreams individually in this extraordinary country will create more opportunities, more benefits than any government program ever created. I believe that in my heart, and I know you do as well. But in order for that to come true, for us to embrace that again, to renew our country, we have to win. We have to win. And how are we going to do that? My belief is we'll do that by having someone who has a proven record, who has a record of running to the fire rather than cutting and running. We have a lot of politicians that are gifted now. A lot of them are running for President of the United States. We got a lot of people running for President of the United States. But I hope you want someone who has a heart for people. I hope you want someone who has a spine, who will stand on principle, fight for the principles that we believe in, has a proven record to show it, whose ambition is service to others rather than making sure that they're going to look good for the next political possibility. We have the front-running candidate for President of the United States in our party right now who's not a conservative. He isn't. He's a gifted entertainer, but he's not a conservative. Donald Trump gave money to the Clintons. Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, Clinton Foundation. Donald Trump said that Hillary Clinton would be a great negotiator with Iran. In less than a decade, Donald Trump's views on the Second Amendment, on the cause of human life, across the board on the moral and social issues have gone from extreme left to I don't know what. Donald Trump proposed in less than a decade ago a tax of 14.5% on the assets of people in this country. That's not conservative. Donald Trump believes and admires the single-payer system. That's Bernie Sanders' position. That's not conservative. For a Republican to win, We need a conservative in charge of leading the charge for the conservative party to take on Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders. And we have to do it in a way that draws people towards our cause. I don't know about you, but I'm sick and tired of politicians that divide us up in our disparate parts, that find ways to disparage people to make themselves look strong. It is not strong to insult women. It is not strong. It is not a sign of strength when you insult Hispanics. It is not a sign of strength. It is not a sign of strength when you say that a POW is a loser because they got caught. John McCain is a hero. It is not a sign of strength disparaging the disabled in this country. It is not. It is a sign of deep insecurity and weakness. So you all have this incredible opportunity. Maybe you consider it a responsibility. Maybe it's a burden to you. I hope it isn't. You have the responsibility of reshaping this race, in my mind. You certainly have the opportunity to do it if you like. Do you want a president that cares for people that are stuck in poverty? Do you want a president that believes that the middle class needs to get higher income? Do you want a president that as commander-in-chief will have a steady hand, that won't say the craziest stuff in the world to create insecurity for us and for the troops that we count on to keep us safe? You can make that choice. You have the chance to reshape the whole primary. The pundits have it all figured out. They've got it all figured out. They just marvel at all this stuff, and conventional wisdom has converged. They've got it all. They're the smart people. They're not voting. You all are making this decision. I have total confidence in the wisdom and judgment of New Hampshire voters that take the time to ask the right questions, that take the time to challenge the candidates, make them walk on the hot coals. You do it politely, but you make us walk on the hot coals. I have total confidence and belief that you will make the right choice. I humbly ask for your support, and I promise you, should I be our party's nominee, I will unite around common purpose and the conservative cause, and I will defeat Hillary Clinton, and we will restore America's greatness. Thank you all very much. Oh, good. Thank you, guys. Questions? Yes, sir. Mike's right behind you.
I have a national security question to ask you. It's about a particular type of nuclear attack. It's called electromagnetic pulse.
Yes.
And some of your opponents in the primary have forthrightly talked about this issue and have been pilloried in the press.
Why?
Well, they're called, if you read the New York Times or the Washington Post, there's references to people who talk about this particular type of nuclear attack, electromagnetic pulse, forthrightly, as wearing tinfoil hats, crazies, crackpots, and that kind of thing.
Gotcha.
Is this a serious national security issue?
It is. I got to tell you an interesting New Hampshire story, because on my first, I think it was my first trip here, I went to Politics and Pie in Concord. You guys got great titles for events. I've enjoyed, was it Politics and Eggs? Politics and Pie. And the first question this lady asked me, and apparently she has she tries to find trick questions, people, try to see if you can trip up the candidates. And she said, well, are you concerned about EMPs? Electromagnetic pulse, And I would not have known that, to be honest with you. I had no clue what that was 10 days before, but I had just read an article about it. And if you read the articles about what this is, damn right it's an important issue. There's no tinfoil problems with this. This is a huge issue. It could actually happen naturally. And the more that we're dependent upon the grid for everything. I mean, think about today, half of the East Coast is shut down. If the grid was shut down, it would just paralyze everybody in place. We are totally dependent upon the interconnectivity that exists technologically now. So it is hugely important. A surge inside the grid could destroy, just freeze us in place. It would be chaotic. And if it was an aggressive act taken by a hostile nation, it would have a dramatic impact, or by, ultimately a rogue nation that believed in the apocalypse. It's a serious problem. It's one of many new challenges that we face as a nation. And one of the dangers, I think, in politics is that we focus on the old battles. Look, there are things that a traditional Army and Air Force is still important. We need to maintain the traditional force structures, but we also need to recognize from a national security point of view that these asymmetric threats of terror are important. Cyber security is hugely important. This issue of the grid and its attack, the attack on the grid is important. And how we deal with the space, just in terms of our capabilities, which we're gutting now. Now, I'm from Florida. I have a special place in my heart for the space industry. I think it's part of our DNA as a nation. But from the defense posture, the gap that we have, superiority gap, has narrowed. The Russians and the Chinese are totally committed to this, and we've pulled back. So it is not a tinfoil question. It's a good question, and I think the next president needs to make sure that he's vigilant on that subject. Yes, sir. Right behind you.
Governor, thanks for coming out. My name's Jay Flightman. I'm from the neighboring state of Massachusetts.
Oh, okay. Well, you don't matter. You matter a lot, sir. Don't take that as a joke. March 1st is your primary. I'd love to have your vote.
We're looking forward to having you come down. Many people feel that the greatest threat to national security is the $19 trillion national debt.
Yep.
And can you give us some specifics on what you would do to get that under control?
Sure. It is a threat. If we're weakened economically, it's hard to imagine how we could restore the military strength of the country. The solution to the deficit, or the debt, is to reduce the deficit. And the way you would do that is first grow the economy, create pro-growth strategies as it relates to regulation and taxes, embracing the energy revolution. Those three things will jumpstart investment in our own country. We've had a recovery that is totally consumer-driven, not capital investing. And so our wages have declined and our growth is tepid. 2% growth is acceptable today. Workforce participation rates are lower. You lessen demands on government with higher growth and you increase revenue for government by higher growth. It is far better to do that than raising taxes, because that creates a lid on economic growth. So growing the economy. Secondly, we need entitlement reform and Social Security reform. And I've laid out detailed plans to do that. That saves over 10 years hundreds of billions of dollars. If we don't do it, the growth of Medicaid, Medicare, Obamacare, and the Kid Care program, the SCHIP program, will grow at 6, 7, 8% per year. Far more than the revenue that the government takes in, and far more than any other government program. We have to reform these programs. And I've laid out detailed plans to preserve and protect Social Security, but move to a system that is actuarially sound, that won't create huge drains. Similarly with Medicare and Medicaid, we need to do the same thing. I think states ought to run the Medicaid programs. We ought to shift all of this out of Washington, D.C. And we need to get rid of Obamacare and replace it with a consumer-driven, private sector-oriented, patient-centered healthcare insurance system that will lower costs. That's the second part. The third part is we need career civil service reform. There are too many government workers. We can reduce, and I promise you, we'll reduce the government workforce by 10% just by attrition. And my plan says if you want to hire someone in a department, you have to have 3 vacancies created. We can shrink the government, but we need reform so that they can embrace technologies and be rewarded for a job well done, but it should not be lifetime employment. That creates huge costs. And then finally, across the spectrum of government, as much as possible beyond Medicaid, education programs, the delegated authority to EPA, transportation programs. Washington is not the place where this should take place. They should be providing this money in block grants back to the state. And I trust states, maybe it's because I'm a governor, I just think if you had the chance to do it the right way from the beginning, you'd get a far better result. If you didn't have all the infrastructure and all the old elements of it, if you had the ability to say, if we weren't doing it this way, how would we do it? That is a liberating kind of approach on policy, and that's how you get the balance, get the budget to balance. And then the growth of the economy as it relates to debt begins to get smaller, and we have to do this. There's no way for us to grow as a country unless we deal with the fact that government is growing far faster than our ability to pay for it. Yes, ma'am.
I just asked you last question, Governor. I'm sorry.
It's yours. You win.
I'm curious how you plan to solve
I hope you're going to ask me about the student loan program.
No, I'm curious how you plan to identify and root out terrorist threats and national security threats without threatening individual privacy rights.
Did everybody hear the question? How do we balance our civil liberties concerns, the right of privacy in our own country, innocent citizens, and protect the homeland? Well, in my mind, that's what we did with the Patriot Act. And the reauthorization of the Patriot Act was the right thing to do. I would have supported including the metadata program in it. People have no trust right now that the government is not snooping on us because, you know, you see the revelations of Snowden and other things like that. There's no evidence. There's no evidence that the federal government is snooping on innocent people. None. People say it, but there's no evidence that that's the case. There is evidence that the metadata program combined with other tools of the Patriot Act have had the ability to keep us safe. And that's the first priority of the government. They attack our freedoms, the people that are trying to attack us. They see our freedom as a vulnerability. The way you protect the freedom is use these tools with all sorts of safeguards in place. The FISA court, making sure that you have, if there's any case where someone is violating civil liberties, you bring the hammer down on people that do it knowingly or unknowingly. We can protect civil liberties and keep us safe. The challenge now, though, is the trust that has been broken now makes it harder. Technology companies are now not cooperating with the United States government. We need to restore the trust between the government and the large technology platforms where much of the conversations in our lives go through. The terrorists now encrypt their messages, and we don't have a backdoor means by which to identify how that works. That can only happen with enhanced cooperation. Other countries no longer believe that the United States is a serious partner because of the revelations of Snowden, and so they've cut off communications. We have to restore this trust. It can't be done by law. It has to be done with a level of cooperation that will keep us safe. Thank you all very much. God bless you all. I wish I could answer more questions. Come to my town hall meetings. Thanks.